Well, what do you know? Right on the heels of the HLG Camarasaurus comes a reply from PNSO. Both companies have offered same genera before, but as far as I can remember, this is the first time it's been a call and answer sequence. So, with HLG's Camarasaurus fresh on our minds, let's get into the PNSO. I've already given some background on Camarasaurus in my HLG review, so we can get right into this model. According to Zhao Chuang, this is based on Camarasaurus supremus. This is interesting, and I'll talk about this at the end of the video. For now, I'll say that this model is about 46 cm or 18 inches through the centra. So, using a true centra estimate of 23 meters or 75.5 feet for supremus, this would be 1 to 50 scale. Now of course, there could have been smaller individuals. The commonest species lentus was about 16 meters or 52.5 feet, making this 1 to 35 scale. The height is 23 centimeters or 9.1 inches. Now here's the Wonder Artistic models 1 to 50th scale humanoid for supremus, and 1 to 35 for lentus. And between the two, you can decide which scale you think it is, with respect to your preferred species. Now the weight of this model is also hefty and weighs 925 grams, or about 2 pounds. The pose is a very active one, with a sense of great dynamic tension, the tail swishing about, the limbs very restless, about to burst into powerful activity. The color is wonderfully refreshing for PNSO, with the purple to grey to purple again, and a pale yellow not just on the underside but also the posterior sides of the limbs, and with different color tones throughout the transitions. Some of you thought it was close to the Tyrannititan, but while the same general color families are present, I think you can see that in terms of the actual tones and paint application, they're very different indeed. Now let's get to the detail. Now the head has that characteristic blunt look that we know so well by now. There's no shrink wrapping here, and in fact, you'll see in the entire animal, it's a very well-fed, very chunky animal. Of immediate interest is the nasal region, where you see what looks like an inflatable soft tissue over the nares, accented in a beige color. Now this is a most unusual look that gives a nod to the idea that there may have been all kinds of unpreserved soft tissue in dinosaurs, but not into the fanciful territory of a trunk. In general, you see very wonderful, very intricate scale detail. In the head, you'll see it in the face, the rostral area, which is sculpted in a, shall I say, a non-committal way, to either be a rhamphatheca or just lips. On the mandible, and pleasingly, even that inflatable sac. I needn't mention the fade of color complementing this detail as well. The eyes are nicely painted, with carefully painted eyelids that really add realistic detail to the windows to the soul. The mandible is nice and robust. Now you can see in this skull how thick it is, certainly not the delicate form of the diplodocene sauropods. Now I like that you can see some teeth protruding past the lip or the rhamphatheca, especially the lower ones almost just peeking over the edge, as suggested by the Wiersma SVP 2017 poster that we talked about in a HLG review. Now the release images show the crazy huge seam or an articulation line. I can confirm that the mouth doesn't articulate and the seam at normal viewing distances isn't egregiously obnoxious. For a perspective on this, here's my almond. You see here directly behind the ear openings how very fine these scales are. Of course, you have the backdrop of the wrinkles down here. But see how as we travel distally, all these scales are very, very fine. And that brings us to the neck. I have to bring out my almond to show you just how fine these scales are. From the top here, you'll see that towards the back of the head, and where it joins the start of the neck, it's already very thick. The color fades are very nice. You see a kind of purple in the general integument. And then it fades into this very pale yellow. And as we move down, you'll notice how the scales increase in size and also change morphology in the ventral part compared to the sides. Then there are all these scattered osteoderms. And dorsally, you'll see all these midline osteoderms. These are also colored very subtly. You can see these stripes faded in very naturally. Now dorsally, the central osteoderms change in color and also have a non-uniformity of shape and size as we move down the animal. You can even get multiple colors bringing together the grey and the brown. In the larger osteoderms here. Now going down the side of the animal, you'll see again that wonderful, very natural looking scale detail. Now these scales look amazing coming down the side. But also in the belly area, they're brought up very nicely, almost like little beads or shall I say a mosaic of beads. And as we go down the body, the scales changing in size and shape, again very subtly. There's absolutely nothing crude here. In the shoulder girdle, you'll see all these fantastic details. These scales are very intricately sculpted. There's really nothing vulgar and attention-seeking about them. Now compared to the Haolonggu, you'll see a kind of finesse and a je ne sais quoi that I keep talking about when it comes to PNSO's work that you simply do not get anywhere else. Now moving down the arms, you can't help but notice how very naturally the creases are formed. For example, in the bend between the shoulder and the arm here, draping almost the musculature in the arms. See this tendon here going into the forearm, and then the various forearm muscles. The wrinkles here are very natural, without the kind of sometimes strange choices I've noticed in some of Haolonggu's skin creases. Then going down the wrist and the main knuckles, just look at the form of the metacarpal area. You see that the way the skin interacts and bunches up here looks very natural and real and convincing. We have that thumb claw, which is also faded in color. It's a very long and prominent one. And underneath, you'll of course see that scale detail. There's nothing lazy going on here. And looking from the front now, you can see these very small chainmail-like scales, very wonderful detail. And from here, you'll see how broad and thick the pectoral area is, just full of muscle. Down the arm, you'll also notice the color transitions fading into one another. The forearms are a very pleasing grey going into the hand. You'll also see in the metacarpal area all these little scales. On the other forelimb, you'll see more of that same masterful work. And then down those marvelous hind limbs. Now starting in the hip area, just look at that painstaking detail taken in the scales and the wrinkles. The scattered osteoderms we saw in the torso are here as well, scattered unobtrusively. And there are mottles of a grey-black. And here, yet more of that wonderful, intricate, exquisite detail down the legs. Then in the calf area, the feet, just look at this, and you can see 2 colors, almost 3 colors just in this area alone. And as for the texture, just look at the foot here. Now there is complexity in the wrinkles of the skin. The form of these claws are really individualized. And the claws are nicely, laterally deviated. You can see how the surrounding soft tissue almost envelop the roots. Digits 4 and 5 are just hinted at here. The claws just tiny nubs poking out from the skin. And then those color fades in the toes, and those nicely painted claws as well. Such wonderful work. The animal just looks real. And in the foot pads are, I think, where you see how much attention PNSO devotes to realism. In the supporting leg here, the foot pad is flat against the floor. No surprises here. But now over here, where the foot has lifted, you'll see a bulge in the foot pad, which is something you'd expect as a foot is lifted off. It's the kind of very subtle detail that people might not even notice, but which Zhao Chuan Lao Shi obviously does. And that really sells the PNSO as a real animal. And here in the sacral area, you'll see the kink at the base of the tail where the proximal caudal articulates with the sacrum. And from the dorsal view, the tail may look really thin, especially when it tapers towards the distal half. However, you'll see in this skeletal by Gunnar Bivens that it is in fact so reconstructed as well. In fact, you see how close this is to that skeletal. I really love when a model is very close to a skeletal done by one of my favorite artists. Now, this neck is something I never thought I'd see, but if anyone were to give me this kind of thickness from the record with Alamosaurus, I guess it would have to be PNSO. And then as we move on to the tail here, you'll see of course that wonderful detail. You know, I really sound like a broken record. And you see the wrinkles, the creases, and of course those basement scales. You'll also see the various muscle bundles in the tail, and the way the skin just wraps around it, with the scales flowing with the lines, making it feel very real. Then the way the color transitions down the tail, all the way to the tip. Even the area of the tip, you can almost see a tritone of colors here. Now on the underside is where we see PNSO's trademark chainmail. How the scales just flow with each crease, changing very subtly in size in different areas. Just really beautiful. around here in the cloacal area. Now, I'm not an anal person, so my anal anatomy is rusty, but you'll see here almost like a set of 3 different muscles controlling the sphincter of the cloaca, if there is one. Now, maybe I'm just talking rubbish, and you guys can correct me on this. So that's a very wonderful look at the very beautiful PNSO Camarasaurus. We'll look at the comparisons in part 2.